For context, I'm a 17-year-old female. I was born and raised in Canada with a pretty sheltered life as my mother's very overprotective. I read a lot of scary stories, so I am in no way naive or unaware of how to deal with a threat. But up until this point, I had never dealt with harassment before. For the summer, I'm visiting my godmother in Italy. This is my first time leaving Canada. Since she works during the weekdays, I travel about on my own around Italy. For this story, I took a ferry to Ischia, a small island in Napoli, to tour around. When I first arrived on the island, I made the plan to head to a small scenic park, not too far from the port so that I could plan my day. It was around 3 p.m. when I was at the park. Now, the park itself made its way into a semi-forested area. The pathways were covered by trees and bushes alike, so it's easy to get lost in there, at least for me. It was also pretty desolate at the time and gone from the public eye. I was sitting on the bench next to a playground for children, decked out with swings and slides. There was a family a little way away from me playing at the playground. The playground resides in a little circle-like clearing in the park. On opposite sides of the clearing are the pathways that take you around the park. The paths have trees making a tunnel-like path, so it can be hard to see down unless you're directly in front of it. From where I was sitting on the bench, which was near the northern pathway, I could directly see down the south pathway. Now, I was sitting at this bench for a while, mind you, as Italy is pretty hot and I'm not used to the heat. My head was down looking at my phone, so I wasn't exactly paying attention to the outside world, but I would look up periodically to watch the family play. It was around 4 p.m., which was nearing when I had to leave to catch my ferry back. As I was about to pack up, I looked up from my phone to see a guy standing in the path across from me, the south pathway. Now, I wear glasses and my eyesight isn't that good, so I really couldn't make out what this guy was standing there for at first glance. I also didn't want it to be known that I had my eyes on him, so I would try to get a better look from my peripherals. After a minute of watching this guy and trying to figure out why he was staring at me, I came to a horrifying conclusion. To put it lightly, this guy was pleasuring himself in public while watching me. It was light out and a literal family was not even 10 feet away from me. This was the first time that I have ever experienced anything like this, so I was scared out of my mind. Let me make myself clear, I look like a teenager. I have acne and a baby face, so it's very clear that I'm underage. As I was sitting there panicking about what to do, I see this guy move side to side in the path to get a better look at me. I mean, the creep looked unassuming, with some gray basketball shorts, a black graphic tee, and a balding head. From what I could tell, he was around his early 30s. Now, I don't speak much Italian, and with how frazzled I was from all this, I could not utter a cohesive sentence. After sitting on the bench for another minute trying to calm down and think clearly, I pull out my translator app and type in a message to translate to Italian. Now, to not alert this creep that I knew what he was doing, I stood up casually and began to make my way to the mother of the family, who was with her young baby at the time. The father and the toddler, I believe, were gone playing off a little further in the trees as I couldn't see them. While shaking with nerves, I approached the mother and held up my phone with a message on it without a word. Now, from where the mother was, you couldn't see down the path, so she was none the wiser about what was happening. Roughly, my translated message went along the line of, "Hello, sorry, I don't speak much Italian, but I'm in need of help. There's a creepy guy on the path over there watching me and I'm scared." Now, I know that I probably should have made my situation more clear in the message, but I was freaking out and I didn't know how well my English would translate into Italian, so I kept it short. After the mother read the message, she got a concerned look on her face and asked me to show her where this guy was. Now, we walked like 5 feet over to where the path begins to find the guy is gone. I assumed that he saw me walking towards the mother. Thankfully, I came to find out that the mother speaks a little English though, I was able to communicate roughly what the creep was doing. Since she was with a baby, I didn't want her to go after the creep, but she was mad enough to attempt it. Eventually, she told me that her husband would be back soon and he spoke more fluently. Once he came back, I re-explained what happened and asked if I could follow them out of the park to a public area, so that I wouldn't be left alone and vulnerable. While they were packing up their belongings, I called my godmother and gave her a brief rundown of the situation and that I'll be making my way back to the ferry. Now I would love to say that this is where my tale ends without any more troubles, but sadly, that was not how it went. After me and the family left the playground, we made our way to the opposite path from where the creep was, to where I assume was the exit to the park and to the main road. While walking, the mother tried to comfort me, assuring the guy wouldn't follow me as he left as soon as he got a clue that I had caught on. I thought differently as I could see this guy very clearly from where I was sitting, and was not subtle about his staring. After walking a bit more throughout the path to the exit, I spot a familiar-looking man walking back to the playground. Once I made eye contact with him, I immediately knew that it was the creep from before, walking casually like nothing was wrong. Once he spotted me walking with the family, he quickly made a turn onto a path that diverged from the main one. This creep was circling back to find me, assuming that I stayed at the playground or was walking alone to the exit. I leaned over to the mother and quickly tell her that it was the same guy, but unfortunately the path that the guy took to avoid us was the same one that we needed to take to get to the exit. The dumb creep had cornered himself without any way to leave except to pass by us. The father at that point had the baby in his arms and the toddler following closely behind him. The mother, in a rage, followed shortly after the creep, cussing him out in a mix of English, Italian, and Spanish, as I come to find out they were visiting from Mexico. This creep walked sheepishly off with his head tucked, pretending that he couldn't hear the lady yelling at him. Finally, after the angry mother stopped following the man, we made it to the exit of the park. I thanked them profusely and bid my farewell and made my way down to the port. That family saved me from a dangerous situation, and I could not be more thankful for their comfort and protection. I often think about what could have happened had I left the park on my own, knowing this guy would have circled back for me. This happened a few hours ago, so the events are still very fresh in my mind, and I needed to get this off my chest. For some relevant backstory, I, a 19-year-old female, work in a tiny factory in the middle of nowhere. The only thing in town other than all the warehouses is a gas station which is a few hundred feet from where I work. I can see it clearly when I step outside. Every day when I get off work at around 5, I walk over to the gas station, buy a drink, light up a cigarette, and then wait for my boyfriend to come pick me up. Today was no different except for the fact that the gas station was much slower than normal. There were only 2 cars on the lot, one which belonged to the gas station attendant. After getting my drink, I got a text from my boyfriend saying that he was running late. I sighed, slightly annoyed, and went around to the side of the building to smoke in the shade since it was scorching in my state that day. I'm standing for a few minutes minding my own business when I hear running footsteps coming my way. I glance up confused and see a scrawny middle-aged man that I had never seen before running towards me with his arms outstretched. He looked absolutely deranged. Now, normally my fight or flight instinct picks fight, but today I froze. I covered my face with my hands out of instinct and waited to be grabbed, but it didn't come. The man must not have noticed my cigarette, and I had completely forgotten because when he screamed, I was very confused, until I noticed that the red-hot cherry burning a hole into his cheek. He starts to pull away, but I push the butt of it in deeper before running around him. He's cursing and muttering to himself, but I don't stick around to find out what he's saying. I slam the doors of the gas station behind me and tell the cashier a very nice woman my age, what had just happened. She insists on calling the police, but I decide not to. I was so tired that I just wanted to go home, and by the time we were brave enough to see if the man was still there, he and the cigarette butts were long gone. My boyfriend came not too long after and we went home. I told everything, and he's going to make sure that he's there right when I get off work from now on. I still have a lot of unanswered questions about this, and since I didn't call the police, I doubt that I'm going to get any answers. Who was the random man, and why was he in the factory district when there are no residential areas for miles? Did he work nearby? Why did he randomly decide to try and grab me in the daylight? What were his intentions? Though I could probably guess. I've never been in a confrontation this serious before. I carry a knife and pepper spray, but I didn't even think of them until after the fact. I guess you really don't know what you'll do until it actually happens. I'm just grateful that my bad habits actually did some good for me. Halloween night. Stereotypical, I know. Several years ago, I was followed home by a stranger. I worked at a large mall about an hour away from home. The store was closed at 10 p.m., and the only bus home ran every hour and only dropped me off 2/3 of the way home, and I would have to walk the rest. This usually happened between 11 to 1 a.m. at night, depending on if I could get the store closed down on time and if the bus wasn't too packed for me to get on. I am not a small woman. I am fairly tall and fairly round and not the most attractive. My uniform was just a polo shirt and black trousers, flat shoes, all covered with a thick coat. I didn't see him get on the bus. To be fair, the bus was packed and noisy, and the walkways were crowded, and I did my best to just block it all out with my headphones and stare out the window. I am not a people person, and having been at work for 12 hours on a busy day, surrounded by these awful people, I was just pissed off and desperate to get off the bus and be alone. When we finally got to my stop, and I managed to struggle my way to the front of the bus through people that refused to move, I stumbled into the night air and breathed a sigh of relief. A couple of people got off the bus behind me, and I started up the hill, crossing the road to continue up the side street that led to my road. This side street is very long and has offshoots into residential streets on very steep hills going down. The street itself is lined with small shops, and there's a high grassy bank on the opposite side that has houses along the top, so it feels very isolated after the shops close down. Very few people get off at my bus stop this time of night, and even fewer head in the same direction. Those that do cut off and go down one of these hills long before I get to the hill that leads up to my building. Now, the street isn't very well lit. The street lamps are few and far between. Several of them are motion activated, so they don't even turn on until you're right on top of them. I've walked home in the dark this way 1,000 times, and I've walked to work this way at 3 or 4 in the morning 1,000 times too. That was for a different job. While I always enjoy the cool night air, I am not afraid of the dark, and I love how bright the stars are where I live. I don't loiter. I walk fast so I can get home and shower as soon as possible. This night, I noticed someone walking behind me. I usually do because, like I stated above, very few people walk this way at this time of night. I was aware of him and waiting for him to turn down one of the side streets. He didn't. It felt a little weird. But I'm not the only person that lives in the area, so maybe he just isn't regularly walking this way this time of night, so I've just never seen him before. I get to the medical surgery and car park at the bottom of my hill and cut across it as I always do. At this point, I know if he also heads up my hill, I need to worry a little more. The hill goes alongside the surgery, and then there are high walls on my side of the street that block off the flats in the other side from my road. They can only be accessed from the road before mine. At the top of the hill, this wall ends and turns into an alley that runs parallel to my building. The opposite side of the road has multiple closed pubs, a closed corner store, and an old church that has been converted into a Muslim worship center, which is also closed. There are even less street lamps here, and my building is surrounded by a metal fence with 20 or so feet of grass that slopes down to the entrance of the building, where the doorway is lit up. The point is, it's isolated, and the only reason someone should be up here this time of night is if they live in my building. This guy crosses the car park after me, and now I'm feeling concerned. I know he doesn't live in my building. There are 9 flats over 3 floors, and 10 people. I know all of them, and they all know me. We would recognize each other even at this level of darkness. So, I walk faster up the hill, hoping to get into the building before he catches up. He starts walking faster too. I can hear him gaining on me, and by the time that I get to the gate, I know that he's too close to me for me to be able to open the door and get inside before he's on me. The building is dark and I know everyone is in bed, and it makes me feel all alone. And at this point, I'm crapping myself. So, thinking quickly, I cross the road and walk further up the hill behind parked cars. I use the opportunity to swing my backpack off of one shoulder and grab my keys. I wait for him to follow me and get behind the cars too, so it'll take just a little longer for him to be able to cross back over before I bolt across the road, throwing open the gate. I swing it hard behind me because he's now running at me, and I think it will either latch before he can catch it, or it will hit him. Either way, it'll buy me a few seconds. I slide down the slope, barely staying on my feet because it's dangerously slippery when it's wet. I turn the corner at the bottom and slam my keycard on the reader, pressing hard on the heavy door before it beeps so it will open that much faster. The door is heavy and on a fire safety hinge. That means I can't slam it or force it closed. The stairs are a couple of steps into the building, and to the left. I live on the top floor. It's not a big building. 3 flats on each floor, 2 flights of stairs. It's also a concrete stairwell, so every little sound echoes and can be heard behind closed doors. I get inside the building and immediately bolt up the stairs. I'm only a few steps up when the door flies open behind me, and this guy comes after me. Feeling a little more secure now that I'm in my building, and only feet away from my neighbors, I spin around before he reaches me and slam my heavy backpack into him. He falls back to the landing and manages to catch himself by grabbing a hold of the handrail. I scream, "What the heck?" at the top of my lungs, and I hold my bag in front of me. Now we're inside and the stairwell is lit by the motion-activated lights. I get my first proper look at him. He's a little taller than me. I'm 5'8". He's black and old enough to be graying. His clothes are weird, all made out of that weird waxy material some weatherproof jackets are made of, and he's wearing heavy boots. I don't recognize him at all, and he looks up at me with wide eyes as I stare down at him. I'm fully prepared to kick him in the face and throw my bag if I have to. I don't want him to be able to follow me into my flat, so I stare him down. He begins to stutter, hands ringing over the handrail and ducking his head a little, trying to look pathetic and harmless. He mutters something about visiting his son. Like I stated before, 9 people other than me live in this building. At that time, none of them were black, and none of them other than myself were young enough for him to be their parent. Even if his son did live here, how would he know to follow me off of the bus to get to my building? Why did he follow me when I moved away from my building? And why did he chase after me? He could have walked to the building and buzzed up to his son for him to let him in if that was even true. I began shouting at him to get out, repeating those words over and over again, sprinkling in, "I don't know you and you don't live here." He continues muttering, making his excuses, but I shout over him. When I hear neighbors moving around and coming towards their doors, probably to look through their peepholes, I begin to back up the stairs. My neighbor is right at the bottom of the stairs behind the man, opens her door, leaving her chain and peering through at us. She asks me if I'm okay and if she needs to call the police. The guy spins to stare at her, his hands out in a stop motion, and I hear another neighbor open his door behind the stairs, also on the ground level. He calls out to ask if everything is okay too, and I just yell out to the both of them, "He followed me home. I don't know him. He won't leave." I'm now at the top of the first step of stairs, still looking down at him. My male neighbor starts telling him to get the heck out, either more intimidated by the man than he was me, or realizing that he was outnumbered. He begins trying to open the front door. You have to press a button to get it to open, and he clearly doesn't know this. Further evidence that he's never been here before. Feeling more secure now that I'm not alone, and he's trying to leave, I bolt across the landing and up the final flight of stairs, and get my door open before locking it behind me. I was dripping in sweat and very close to a panic attack. I dragged my Hoover to the front door and propped it up, just in case someone tried to open my door, and I would hear it fall. I didn't sleep very well that night, listening to every sound in the building, and luckily, I didn't have to work the next day. I woke up at about 6 a.m. to a lot of sound in the building's landings. I could hear people opening every bin, chute room, and coming back out again, I peered through my peephole to see uniformed policemen searching the common areas of the building. I didn't call the police, but I assume one of the neighbors downstairs did. The bin rooms are fairly large, so I imagine they were checking to see if someone was hiding. I don't know for sure, and I didn't ask, other than asking me if I was okay when we saw each other next. The neighbors that helped out that night never said anything else about it. I don't know who he was or what he wanted. I've never seen him again, and I stopped working at that shopping center a couple of years later. I do feel guilty for not calling the police, just in case he had done this before or since, and the women didn't manage to get away. But at the time, I just wanted to forget about it and move forward.